How to create flows in Microsoft Power Automate. This video is all about the ForkandForce connector for Microsoft Power Automate. We are going to show you how to register your connector at the Power Platform, and we will create 3 different flows in Microsoft Power Automate. Register the connector. First, we have to register the connector at the Microsoft Power Platform. We only need to do this once for our ForkandForce installation. After logging into the Power Platform, search for ForkandForce in the connectors menu and select the entry. Now we can select any of the triggers from the list. Now we need to define the name of our connection. We recommend using the installation name of your Force instance. In the field API key, we paste the key we got sent from ForKamp by purchasing the ForkandForce connector for Microsoft Power Automate and click Create. We have established a connection between ForkandForce and the Microsoft Power Automate platform. We must perform this step once for our instance of ForkandForce. Now we turn our attention to the flows and how they are created in Power Automate. Notification flow. We want to create a basic notification flow that alerts us when an operating state of a workplace has been changed. We search for ForkandForce in the search bar and select the trigger when the operating state of a workplace has been changed from the list. Power Automate automatically sets up this trigger and asks for the workplace ID. Since our installation of ForkandForce is connected to Power Automate, we are presented the same names that we know from ForkandForce. We can simply select our desired workplace and click Next Step. Now we are prompted to choose an action. This is executed when our trigger condition applies. For the actions, we can choose from over 400 connectors from Power Automate. So for example, we can post this on Twitter, create a Trello card, you name it. For demonstration purposes, we want to send an email from our Office 365 account. So we search for Outlook and select Send an email in the Actions tab. We enter the recipient of this email and then specify our subject. As soon as we select this field, the dynamic content pop-up is displayed. Here we can select blocks that are related to our trigger and workplace. We combine this and the text in our subject field. For example, the state of workplace description, has changed. The dynamic content, workplace description, gets substituted with the workplace name later in the email. In the body, we want to include the new operating state of our workplace. So we write new operating state, new state description. We click Save, and this is a basic notification flow. Now we want to include the old operating state for comparison. To do so, we add a new action after our first step. We search and select ForkandForce. As action, we select Get Operating State by ID, and as value, we select Old State ID. This dynamic content delivers the old operating state of our selected workplace from above. To make it easier to embed the correct values, we rename this action by clicking on the 3 dots next to the header and select Rename. We name this Get Details about the old state. Then we include this additional information in our message, in this case in the body. We add a new line that gives us the context followed by the description. So we write Old Operating State and select Description from the Dynamic Content menu. And now we see why renaming this action was useful, because we can easily identify which content belongs to which action. Click Save, and we now have completed this flow. To verify everything is correct, you can use the flow checker and test the flow. As we can see, this flow is working flawlessly, and as soon as the operating state changes, we get an email with our specified content. In our next example, we initiate a daily OEE comparison and utilize the expressions included in Power Automate to ensure the correct values get compared. OEE comparison. We want to compare yesterday's OEE with today's at a specific time at the day. And this flow should be executed every day in the morning. In Power Automate, we select Create and select Scheduled Flow. We name our flow and select when this flow should be executed and in what frequency. Starting today at 10 AM, repeat every 1 day. Power Automate translates our entries into understandable language that states this flow will run every day. We click Create and we see our first step is the reoccurrence. By clicking on it, we can easily edit the settings. We create a new step and in the search field we look for OEE. We select the action Get Overall Equipment Efficiency. In the field Workplace ID, we can specify if we want the OEE for a specific workplace or respectively a group of workplaces. If we leave these fields blank, it uses the overall OEE. Now we turn our attention on the start date. We want to retrieve yesterday's OEE and this is a dynamic content. So we utilize the expressions included in Power Automate to specify the correct dynamic value for yesterday. To do so, we use the function UTC-now, which gives us the current time, and add days that allows us to add and subtract days to our expression. So our expression looks like this. Add days, open brackets, UTC-now, brackets, comma, -1, closing brackets. This gives us the current timestamp -1 day. And to make identification easier, we rename this action Get OEE from yesterday. If we want the day before yesterday, you can simply change the add days value to -2 and so on. The same principle applies for the OEE for today. So we create a new step, search for OEE and select Get Overall Equipment Efficiency. In the start date, we enter UTC-now and save. This results into today's OEE and we rename this step Get OEE from today. Since we want a comparison, we now need to implement conditions for our OEE values. So we select New Step and then we can search for condition or select Control as action and then choose Condition. The flow diagram now includes two if branches, one stating the case for if this condition is true, the other one if this doesn't apply. But first we need to define our condition. We choose the first value for our comparison, today's OEE, set the operator, for example, is greater than, and then the second value, yesterday's OEE. So now we have set up the condition that compares today's value to yesterday's. And if the condition is true, we want to send a positive feedback to our team. In the if yes case, we add an action, and for the sake of this example, we send a message via Microsoft Teams. So we select Post a Message from the Teams connector, select our designated team or channel, and finally create our message. But why is there no dynamic content? Can't we include the values for our OEE? Yes, we can, but this step only supports string as data type, so we need to initialize our OEE values as a string to set it up in this flow. To do so, we implement a new step before our condition step. We search for initialize variable and name our variable. As type, we select string, and in the value step, we write the part of our message that describes our OEE. For example, today's OEE is OEE, yesterday's OEE was OEE. Again, this shows why it is very handy to name our steps. Now we can use this variable as a dynamic content for our condition and give feedback to our team and congratulate them on their great work. After saving, we can test this flow by clicking Test. This results in our desired message, and we are also displayed the times it took to complete the steps. If we want to refine our flow, we can round our OEE to 2 decimals and display the value in percentage. To realize that, simply use the built-in functions and expressions in Microsoft Power Automate. Trigger from the terminal. If you want to trigger a custom event from the Shopfloor terminal, you can realize this, for example, by integrating a button in your Shopfloor terminal that acts as a trigger for a workflow in Microsoft Power Automate. To do so, we have to take a look into the ForCam4's workbench and understand the underlying principle. So, navigate to Configuration, Shopfloor Terminal, and open your desired Shopfloor Terminal template in the Edit mode. We already included a button in the terminal that is utilized for this action. Behind this button lies a function that allows us to send a customized activity step via the Bridge API. And in this example, Power Automate listens to this callback. A quick overview over the structure. This activity step or event must have a unique name, and this name is used as the identifier in Microsoft Power Automate. In the workbench, we define 5 key value pairs that are necessary, and in Power Automate, we define a flow that is executed on a custom action that listens to the defined trigger name and expects exactly these 5 key value pairs, even if they are empty. In Power Automate, we define a new flow and select when a customized action occurs. We type in our trigger event name, and as the next step, we want to generate an email. And now for demonstration purposes, we also include all 5 key value pairs in the body. Fork and Force will always send these 5 key value pairs, and so we can include them. Let's take a closer look at these pairs. In these, you can almost send any information you want. By default, these key value pairs contain a static information only, so simply creating them would suffice to generate a custom triggered event from the shop floor terminal. We can take it one step further by adding dynamic content to our key value pairs. For example, we want to transmit the workplace the custom action was triggered from, so that we can identify that later in the resulting email. For that, we need 2 steps. First, we need to create a little Groovy script to hand over the correct parameter to the customized event. And second, we need to assign this parameter to one of our 5 available key value pairs. So let's start with the script. Just remember, a key is a combination of a key identifier and a value. So in this script, we assign our key 1 the combination of the key itself, and in this case the UUID of our workplace, and write this into our parameter that we call from the shop floor terminal step. So now we have our workplace and simply need to map that into our key 1. We do that by assigning the parameter every, aka arbitrary 1, to our global event key value. That leaves us with the following key value pair. Key 1 has the value of the UUID of the workplace that this button was pressed on. With the same method, you can, for example, send your geo coordinates or other information. In order to implement all this, we include a new activity step for our button. In this case, a scripting activity step. We paste the script into the corresponding field and click Save. Now we need to define the input and output parameters. First, we create an input parameter by right-clicking on the list element and creating a new entry, and select Workplace to Workplace. Then we add our output parameter to the list. Here we select arbitrary 1, every, and parameter every. We click Save, and this gives us the key value pair key 1 workplace UUID that we now need for the second activity step. Send customized global event. Here we define one input parameter and assign parameter every to global event key value pairs every. That combination is key 1 used for our flow. Since all our other parameters are static key value pairs, we simply define them in the entry below and name them key 2, 3, 4 and 5. Together with a dynamic key from before, we have our 5 necessary key value pairs. The last step is to name our event and then save our configuration. With this definition in the template, we can complete our Power Automate flow. We add a new step and select Force, Activity, Get Workplace. This call gives us a list of workplaces, and we scroll to the bottom and we can select our customized value. And this value is our key 1. This works because the UUID identifies the workplace and loads all the details for the transmitted workplace. When we now select a dynamic content, for example the name of a workplace, Power Automate uses the workplace used in key 1. The same applies for any other dynamic content, like for example the operating state description. We recommend using the UUID so that we can retrieve all the information related to this workplace. We can include the clear text name of the workplace, and for example add the operate state description. So let us now test our flow. We receive our email notification triggered from the Shop for Terminal button, transmitting all the requested information delivered by ForCam Force.